What up, y'all? It's Timmy with Full Send Alaskan Overland, and today we're going to show you how to install a solenoid, which is this guy. And what that will do is while you're driving, it will charge your RV or camper or van battery in the back. So that's what's going on. So let's get to it. And welcome to Truck House Life, baby. So in short, what we're going to do is run a wire from the truck's battery all the way to the house battery. And we're going to put this thing called a battery isolator or a solenoid in between the house battery and the truck battery. And what that does is when I turn the ignition off, pull my keys out, it breaks the circuit. That way my house battery can't drain my truck battery. Boom! So let's do it. Just so you guys can see, here's the diagram. Just pause the video if you want to stare at this diagram a little closer. You want to make sure to use 4-gauge wire to be safe. That way nothing catches on fire, blah, blah, blah. I think that's smart. You're going to need it's a 2-way quick disconnect if you're going to do a truck bed camper. So if you want to remove your camper, you need to make sure you can disconnect the wire. So I'm going to use just a 2-way connector right there. Other than that, pair of lineman's pliers, wire strippers, and going to need some fuses. I went with the cheap ones. I'm going to do something a little ghetto, but it'll work. And a whole bunch of battery terminal kind of connectors, and a little bit of 10-gauge wire to go from the ignition to the top of the solenoid. So let's do it. So first things first, let's pop the hood. This is a diesel, so it has 2 batteries. Let's just do this side, the driver's side, since it's the shortest run. So the first thing we're gonna do is mount the solenoid under the truck hood. That's what it looks like. So you basically have your hot wire running through it. So this will go to the car battery. This side will go to the house battery. This top part will go to my ignition or just an AC. That way, whenever I turn my key on, it connects the circuit and powers that. So let's do that. All right, 5 minutes later, we're back. The solenoid is mounted. So next step, let's do the hard part. Let's run the smaller gauge wire. Got 10 gauge, you could probably use 12. I'm gonna run this wire from this little tiny terminal on the solenoid to the ignition. Okay, so I found an ignition wire right here. So I'm going to splice my 10 gauge positive wire into the ignition positive wire. And then I'm going to run my 10 gauge through the firewall and to the solenoid. Massive difference in the wire size there. You don't really need 10 gauge wire for this. That's just what I had. I just pushed it through the firewall, so there it is. So now we're going to connect this ignition wire to this top stud right here. We just got that 10 gauge wire from the ignition through the firewall of the truck and ran it right up there to the top of the solenoid. So our next step, we're going to take the 4-gauge wire and do a long run from this back side of the solenoid all the way down to the truck camper. Talk about barely fitting. This is the end of the cable right there. So now we have the 4-gauge house wire running from the camper up under the truck, pops out right here into the hood. So now we're gonna take a little battery terminal mount and put it on here and mount this to the back side of the solenoid there. Okay, so now we have the 4-gauge wire running from the camper all the way under the truck, popping out right here, and it's mounted into the back of the battery solenoid. The ignition wire is mounted here. So the next thing we're gonna do is run the negative 4-gauge cable from the car battery right here, from the negative terminal, all the way down to the house battery negative terminal. I've got both my 4-gauge wires, my negative and positive, that go all the way to the battery and the solenoid. And now let's wire those up. So now the car side and the camper side have been wired up, so I can disconnect the camper and slide it out and disconnect the power instantly if I need to. So our next move is to run a 4-gauge wire from the front of the solenoid to the truck battery positive side. So I've got a battery terminal loop on both sides, and I split the middle of this cable with an 80 amp fuse. All right, moment of truth. So essentially the positive and the negative 4 amp cables are running all the way to the house battery in the very back. So they're broken up by a fuse in between the car battery and the solenoid. And in the back, I've got it broken up again with another 80 amp fuse going into the positive, and the negative wire just runs all the way basically to the car battery. So let's see what happens. Let's see. All right, so let's see what it's doing. It's saying 100%, 12.5 volts. So how we know it's gonna work is if I start the car and this voltage goes up to like 13 something. So let's go start the car. All right, we started it up. Now let's see if our voltage went up. Oh yeah, buddy. It went up a little bit. So this is a diesel, so this vehicle has 2 batteries up front. So the alternator is trying to power both those batteries and this battery. So it's not gonna be super high voltage, but it looks like it went up quite a bit. So that's a good sign. Since the voltage is going up like this, that means the truck alternator is now charging the house battery. So, successful project. Cool. Okay. You definitely don't want to touch that. It will electrocute you. Let's see what our battery's doing. Yep, there we go. So my truck battery's not super full, so I can tell it's kind of drawing the house battery back the other way, actually. That's funny. Alrighty. It's working. So that's how it's done. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and we will be going on other adventures and doing more how-tos in the near future. Thank you, and see y'all on the road.